So how can we make sure that we give the user some feedback that the form is being submitted and that we then redirect the user once the form submission has been done? Well, I'll start with redirecting because that's the easier or quicker part. And for that, we have to do two things. As a first step, we should await this store post operation. Because in that store post function, I added a delay to simulate a slow server, and therefore this store post function returns a promise which only resolves after 1 second in the end. Therefore, I have to await this operation, and then thereafter I want to redirect, and we can redirect with help of the redirect function, which is imported from the next navigation package like this. And make sure that you are importing it from there and not from anywhere else. This redirect function can then be called to redirect the user to some other page. And you could call that directly from inside some component function as well, but here we're calling it from inside that server action. Redirect then simply takes a string that defines the path to which you want to redirect, for example, to the /feed route. So that's the first step. The second step now is that I actually want to replace these buttons here with some loading text whilst we're handling the form submission on the server side. And to do that, we can use another hook provided by React. And yes, it's again a hook provided by React, not Next.js. Specifically, it's a hook provided by the React DOM package, actually. The useFormStatus hook. Now, to use this hook, we need to create a separate component function. And I'll actually create that in a separate file because it will need to become a client component, and I don't want to turn this overall component into a client component. So I'll actually add a new component here in the components folder, and I'll name it formSubmit.js, or that's the file name. I'll name the component formSubmit though, like this. And then in there, I want to use this useFormStatus hook. So you should import useFormStatus from React-DOM, like this. And then call this hook here in the formSubmit component function. And this hook will give you a status object that contains various information about the submission status of a surrounding form. So this component, which uses this hook, must now be used inside of a form, so between those form element tags. That's required for this hook to work. Then here, I'll simply return these buttons. So I'll grab these two buttons here and cut them from the new post page component here, and instead return them here wrapped with a fragment, since we have two sibling elements here. And now we can and should use this newly added formSubmit component here instead of these buttons. And as mentioned, this component, since it uses this useFormStatus hook, must be used between form tags. That's required, which is the case here. Now with that though, you would get an error because, as I mentioned, this useFormStatus hook can now only be used in a client component. So in a component that has this useClient directive at the top of the file. Therefore, we should go to this formSubmit component and add useClient here. And with that, the error will go away. Now, that's not all though, because at the moment we're not using this hook and this status. But that's what I'll do next. Because this status object will actually have a pending prop. And you can console log the entire object to find out what else is in there. But most importantly, it has this pending property, which is a Boolean, so true or false, which tells us if the surrounding form is currently being submitted. And if the surrounding form is being submitted, and pending therefore is true, I want to return a paragraph here where I say creating post like this. And otherwise, if it's not pending, I'll return those buttons. And with that, if we now save that and reload, we got those buttons here initially. But now if I again enter some data, pick some image, and click create post, you see I got this fallback text, and then we're redirected to the feed page. So both features work, the redirection and the fallback content we're showing here instead of the buttons whilst the form is being submitted. And as you see, this feature can easily be added with the useFormStatus hook. The only important thing here is that it must be in a separate component, which then must be used between form elements. That's required. And that separate component must be a client component.